afternoon. I'm David Gorski with Clark Hill Strasburger. Earlier this morning, you may have seen Steve Roberts, who works in our bankruptcy and business practice over at Clark Hill Strasburger in our Austin office. I came up here from Houston for this to give a presentation generally on intellectual property. The kind of question I want to be able to answer is, well, why do you care about IP in the first place? It's particularly important for new businesses that are in development because it is the profound danger of you need to rely on intellectual property that has been destroyed from the very beginning. The story of intellectual property in business is kind of like having a brand new Kentucky Derby just took place, brand new racehorse, and so the first thing you're going to do is lead it out onto the track and shoot it. That would not sound like a very good idea to invest in a racehorse by doing that. But that is, unfortunately, too often what happens with companies. They end up saying, I've got this great new idea, I'm going to go share it, and I'm going to go tell the investor, and by that time, they're already saying, well, I could get a knockoff of this made and get it manufactured in another country and put it into Walmarts everywhere, and this person has nothing to stop me. Because intellectual property rights are generally not about what you can do. They're about what you cannot do. They're exclusionary rights. Your job is to, in the lines from Clint Eastwood from the movie Gran Torino, get off my lawn. That's what you want. You want the power to tell people to get out of your business. Whether you make your business successful or not is a separate issue. And that also confuses people because they think, well, my intellectual property lawyer is going to help me commercialize. We're going to provide you with some avenues of commercialization, maybe, but the fact is commercializing is not really what intellectual property is about. It's about making sure that you have enforceable rights to prevent others from getting into your market space, getting into your market, taking up your market share. Intellectual property is largely broken into 4 categories. There are some larger and smaller areas on the sides, but basically the big 4 I think you've all heard of. Number 1 is patents. Number 2 is copyrights. 3 is trademarks. And 4th is trade secrets. There is some degree of overlap or choosing between these areas, but largely they are all kept separate. Their origination of rights under them are different. Trade secrets, copyrights, trademarks, those rights come into existence due to no effort of your own. They are there the minute the idea enters your head. The minute you actually perform an act under the Copyright Act, Trademark Act, or Trade Secret Act, you now have one. Now, as to whether or not it's been registered with the government, you can use it as collateral with the bank or not, that maybe takes some legal work to formalize it. But the fact is, some rights do exist already under common or state or federal law at the minute that happens. The outlier of that is the patent. Patents do not have any rights until they are granted by the U.S. government. And if they don't grant from the U.S. government, it's possible that that right will never come to exist anywhere. We also have got a treaty in the United States. It's called the Patent Cooperation Treaty, which allows you to then later leverage your patent rights into other countries in the world, any member country. There are over 140 countries who have signed the PCT. And so you have an option to go and get rights in other countries based on your U.S. priority. And likewise, someone has an invention in Italy, they have a right to come into the United States from Italy through this treaty as well. But let's start with the general thing is, does everyone accept the fact that intellectual property is valuable? All right, no need to go over how valuable it is, it's big. In the United States, intellectual property makes up something like 30% of the value in the economy. This is a big increase over the last 30 years. You'll probably find that the increase in intellectual property is directly in proportion to computer and electrical technologies. But while other technologies existed before, they merely competed alongside. But this has created a major boom. Think about how easy it is to publish something now. How easy it is to take photographs. Anyone remember film? Okay? Now think about how many more pictures you can take when you can have an unlimited digital memory. Because you can always just erase them for no cost. When photographers used to have to buy film and pay for development of film, it was rather costly to go through 6 rolls or 10 rolls of film because you're going to shoot 30 minutes of a football game. Now you just run the digital camera. Now you just run the video and then have someone edit out still photos from the video. And then you erase it. And as a result of that, it costs you next to nothing, just the time of the photographer. So the nature of technology evolving has created a boom in intellectual property. Globalization has also helped because now we have platforms that intellectual property can be ported from country to country to country. You have a cell phone that works here today, probably can work anywhere in the world. It used to be you had to be one cell phone per country, or one cell phone for the United States and one cell phone for outside the United States, because different protocols were being used. So, let's go through the basics now. We're going to walk through the 4 types of intellectual property and their basic characteristics. Start with the patent, which is the one that takes the most effort up front. You have an invention. An invention is something which is new, not obvious, useful, and is not barred or banned by any of the many other subsidiary laws in the United States or the host country. That's it. So, new. No one's done it before. Non-obvious. Okay, if you have a wooden handle on a shovel and you replace it with a fiberglass handle on a shovel, obvious or non-obvious?
Obvious.
Obvious. You can't get a patent on that then. Okay? Now, someone comes up with you've got a car. It's got an engine in it. The engine's got 6 cylinders. It's a V6 engine. Somebody comes up with another engine for a car. I'm going to power the car with an engine. This engine, instead of using pistons and cylinders, ends up rotating. Obvious or not obvious?
Not obvious.
Not obvious. It was a completely different way of approaching the same problem. You can't get a patent on powering a car, but you could get a patent on a rotating engine. This particular engine is the Wankel engine, and the Wankel engine is what powers the RX-7 and RX-8 sports cars at one point in time. They used a rotary engine. So, once you meet those criteria, new, non-obvious, and useful, you're in the race for a patent. Do you want one? I don't know. There's a threshold question when you're starting out about whether you want a patent or not. Are you selling a product? If you're selling a product, you most likely are interested in patent protection. The reason for that is because if you sell me a product and I like it, I'm going to take it home, I'm going to take it apart, and I'm going to make one just like it. Because there is nothing illegal about reverse engineering. If you've got a patent, that would become infringement. If you don't have a patent, anyone can take apart anything you sell to them and build their own. So you can't keep it secret. And that's the threshold question. Can you keep what you're selling secret? Now, you're selling a service. Service is going to be enabled on your Apple computer, and it is going to work through a web portal. And all of the real works of the algorithm take place behind the portal where the user never sees. Can you keep it a secret? Yeah, you can. They know the result. You put the data in, the data comes out, but they never see how you do it. That can be kept a secret. Do you get a patent? Now you have an option. You may choose to, you may choose not to. That's more of a business and strategic decision. But the fact is, because you can keep it a secret, you have the opportunity to say, I'm going to make this a trade secret instead. Because not everything is allowed to have patent protection, and not everything is allowed to have trade secret protection, depending on how you use it, this is a threshold in deciding how you're going to operate your business. Because that very same person who has got their algorithm behind the portal could have decided instead, well, I'm going to download that into the app that's put in the hands of the user. At which point someone could disassemble the code and try to figure out how to make a duplicate of it. By making that decision as to where they put it, they may have defeated their own trade secrecy. So those are the kind of things to think of right up front. In the process of trying to get a patent, what you have to do is you make a deal. Make a deal with the US government. The terms of the deal are as follows. You have an opportunity to get a legal monopoly on whatever your invention is claimed for up to 20 years from the date you file. In exchange for this, one, you submit an explanation as to how to do your invention, how to build it, make it, perform it. You're going to agree that when the patent is granted, if a patent is granted, that you will disclose to everybody publicly how to do it so they can make their own. And when that 20-year period expires, you will dedicate everything of it to the public. But you have a monopoly for 20 years in exchange for that. Okay? Now, if you have no choice but to make something public, that's a pretty good deal. If you have a choice, you may think of it a little differently. The formula for Coca-Cola has been hidden for over 80 years. They didn't go for the 20-year protection. Same with the recipe for Kentucky Fried Chicken and various other things that classify as trade secrets. In order to get a patent, you have to tell everybody how to do it, such that a person of skill in the art could reproduce it. And then you go to a patent lawyer or a patent agent, you write up the explanation, you submit a list of claims as to what you claim are your legal rights, and then you prosecute it before the U.S. Patent Office. If you succeed, the success rate on patents is around 55%. It varies from various areas of art, whether it be biomedical or chemical or electrical or mechanical. You get your patent, and then you have enforceable rights. Anybody who now performs your invention would be infringing. Infringement is a strict liability crime or offense. This is not technically criminal, it's a civil issue. Now, infringement is strict liability. That means your intent does not matter, nor does their intent matter. So if someone is using your invention or is making your invention, you can come and say you have to stop. And if you've damaged me, you have to pay damages. And it doesn't matter that you didn't mean to, because that's what the monopoly right gives you. So it's very helpful. Now think about this. You may feel that's a good or bad idea, but the people who invest in your company, they love this idea. They love the idea that whether you think monopoly powers are a good idea or not, they love the fact their investment is protected by a monopoly power. They love that idea. They love the fact that a patent is a transferable asset, as is all intellectual property. It says it's got metes and bounds, what it claims, what it describes. It can be valued, it can be sold. So that means it's very useful for a startup business as collateral. I think, do you have a patent application on file is that fundamental question that everyone gets asked when they're on that show Shark Tank. Do you have one? Because if not, I can rip you off right now. And you don't want that to happen. So, next we have trade secrets. The alternative to the patent. These are mutually exclusive. Once you go down one road, you cannot go down the other. You keep it a secret. 3 people can keep a secret as long as 2 of them are dead. And there's a lot of truth to that. The most important opening document in any discussion regarding you setting up your intellectual property is going to be something which is not even an intellectual property document. It's a non-disclosure statement. A non-disclosure agreement, or also called a confidentiality agreement. They are usually one-pagers. They can be obtained from your lawyer very easily at low expense. They might even have some samples on LegalZoom. I would imagine they do. And the whole point is that if you're going to go and pitch an idea, you want the other person to be willing to sign that agreement to say, anything I learn here, I'm not going to go and take out and try to commercialize and basically ruin your day. If you are in a deal and somebody will not sign a non-disclosure agreement, you probably shouldn't be meeting with that person to begin with. Because they're basically saying, I will promise to not lie to you. Will you still now tell me your idea? I'm not going to promise I won't steal from you. Not necessarily a good situation to be in. Coming back to the trade secrets. It's anything of value you can keep secret. Used to be, it varied a lot from state to state, but now there is a Federal Trade Secret Act, so there is both federal and state protection. Basically, I cannot use illegal means to obtain something that is a secret for you. Your secret formula, your secret method, the chemistry, your customer list, your prices, internal prices, things like that. You just can't come and take them. Now, can you do your own work to figure them out? Yes, you can. That's not a misappropriation of trade secrets. If I invent it myself, I can do it and practice it. If I want to let the secret out of the bag after I've discovered it, I can. But I can't take it from you. I can't let you do the work for me and then sneak it out and then commercialize it and make it and use it for my own value. You know, let me give an example of that on the far end. You're a drug manufacturer and you're doing trials. Okay? You need to do 5,000 trials related to a test for a new drug with the rats. Okay? Now, early in the process, you make a discovery of these. You figure out that there, of those 5,000 trials that are still ongoing, 2,000 of them have already failed. You know which 2,000 failed. Somebody from a rival drug company comes over and they obtain this information illegally as to what the failed trials were. Well, you don't have a working drug that's passed the trials. They don't have a working drug. They just know that you had 2,000 trials that didn't work. They then use that in their research to focus on the remaining 3,000. Has someone stolen a trade secret?
Yeah.
Yes. You stole the answer of 2,000 ways not to make it work. You saved them the effort of 2,000 mistakes. As a result, a trade secret has been misappropriated. And they can be sued for that. Because they basically used your effort to give themselves a shortcut. Trade secrets do not need to be perfectly secret. They simply need to be something of value that you don't want other people to know, and that you have taken diligent steps to make sure that people aren't going to steal it. So if you publish it on your website, it's not a trade secret because you didn't put forth any diligence to protect it. If you leave the binders out, the classic question is, all right, if you've got the secret folder and you lock it in your safe every night and you make all your employees sign agreements not to talk to anybody, that seems like a diligent effort in protecting it. If you take a full-page newspaper ad explaining what your secret is, not going to work. Let's move on to trademarks. Trademarks are brands. Famous brands. Coca-Cola, Louis Vuitton. How many people have bought a way too expensive pair of sunglasses because it was a name brand, only to find out that they really work about as well as the $20 pair you could get at Target or Walmart? Okay. So I got my sunglasses here with me. My sunglasses cost me $7 at Walmart, and they have lasted me far longer than my wife's pair of Gucci sunglasses. And they also survive being sat on better than hers do too. Now, the thing is, that brand has value. That's the reason why someone's willing to spend money on a Louis Vuitton bag. And a bag that would cost you $80 can be sold for $1,100 just because it's got that LV logo on it. Because a trademark is an indication of source. A trademark is something that tells you this has got that stamp of approval or quality that comes from a brand I trust. That could be something as, hey, I like that designer. That designer does really good stuff with their bags, their dresses, the quality of their material. I mean, there was a time when Japanese cars in the 1970s were regarded as junk. And then by the time you reached the 1990s, if it said Toyota or Honda, you knew it was good for 200,000 miles. The goodwill went with the brand reputation. It changes, it shifts. Would you want somebody using your name for a knockoff product if you've developed a quality? No. Because one, they're stealing your goodwill. Two, what happens when they have a big recall and they can't tell whether it's a Hondo automobile or a Honda automobile. And it's all over the news that such and such is junk. Because 3 people died because of an airbag failure or something like that. Well, as a result, you have trademark rights. These rights exist at common law. The minute you start selling under a name, you're allowed to then use that name and build goodwill into it. Happens the day it starts. The only thing you're not allowed to do is use someone else's trademark. And you're not allowed to make your mark confusing, intentionally or unintentionally, with someone else's. Because then you may be unintentionally stealing someone else's goodwill. You know, you better believe that Apple is very interested in their goodwill because when you associate the name Apple with something. By the way, since a trademark is an indication of source and not a thing, does anyone know what the one thing Apple cannot sell under the Apple trademark? That's what it is. Trademark is not selling. You know, okay, great. That's name that, but that sets it aside. Now you need more of blank drug. Okay. Trademarks, while the rights come into effect the minute you start using them, you can register them. Registering saves them the effort of accidentally copying your mark. And secondly, it allows you to say, look, if you are stealing my goodwill, the damages started when you knew that it was in the registration. It gives you access to greater rights and greater damages. But it is the brand, not the thing. Copyright. Copyright is the protection of any form of artistic expression or creative expression that is then fixed in the media. You put it down on a piece of paper, you put it into a book, you put it onto a video screen, an audio recording, onto a computer disk. You have now fixed the expression. The idea simply being is it's no longer just in your head. Any voices you hear in your head are not copyrightable. Once you write down what the voices are telling you and write the next great novel, that's copyrightable work right there. Same thing as with trademarks. You have common law rights that exist. You have federal rights if you register. Registration of a copyright is really pretty inexpensive. Oftentimes, when people have lots of copyrights, for example, a photographer has a copyright in all the photos they have. Okay? Well, they may well say, okay, I've got a reel of 4,000 photos. I want to copyright that en masse. You can do that to keep the expenses down, keep it from getting ridiculous. You take a picture of the Eiffel Tower. You don't have any rights in the Eiffel Tower. Public building. You have a right to your photograph. What happens when someone else takes a picture of the Eiffel Tower? They get a right in their photograph. And that's how it works. You see, people don't think about that, but this came up with the big issue with the selfie where the orangutan took the camera and took the picture of took a self photo. Who did it? Because copyright law is restricted to the acts of a creative artist, which is human. Okay, so who would own the photo? The manufacturer of the camera, the manufacturer of the software of the camera, the owner of the camera who did not push the button that actually took the picture. How did that actually work? By the way, when that did go up to the courts, they ended up waffling on that and ended up saying, well, basically, okay, look, it goes to the photographer, but the photographer is going to donate all their money to the World Wildlife Fund charity because he does not want to have this reputation of being the guy who stole a potential copyright from the orangutan, from the primate. But there's our questions that have come up on copyright law is what happens when you have something created where a machine does part of the creating. The 3D image. The 3D image is, for example, this is a 3D image in a video game. Okay, who created the image? Someone created the software engine. Somebody is controlling and playing the game. Somebody created the graphic textures. Someone owns the computer that the rendering is being done on. And then someone, okay, so who owns that image at that instance in time? Now, if you take a picture or a snap of that screen, guess what? Now you're a photographer. That's easy. The photographer owns it because you took the picture. Think about all that copyright out there that involves all those selfies. Yes, sir?
Copyright applies to code as well, right? Software?
Absolutely.
And on a contractual basis with your employee, and I just wanted to clarify if it's the same in the US. Once you have this relationship for work of hire with your developer, let's say for that, you can have that as an asset of the company, but once it becomes an employee of the company, you can have that as an asset in the books of incremental value, or
You can have a copyright produced by an employee or by an independent contractor as an asset of value to the company.
Okay.
What happens is that in a good employment agreement, it will have the work for hire language of an independent contractor in the employment agreement itself, so that as things are being incrementally created, it is automatically inuring to the company and becoming company property, as long as it is within the scope of the job of the employee. Because it's arguable that if somebody involving a company that does not do fantasy football has developed a fantasy football pool among his coworkers, that would not necessarily become company property. Though there are some companies that have got employment agreements written so strictly that you'd think it actually became company property.
okay.
So,
Thank you so much.
generally, that is how that will work. And work for hire, by the way, is magic language. You want exactly those words. This is a work for hire in an agreement where you want that to transfer, because that is the magic set of words in the Copyright Act that now says this work has been created for the benefit of another who will own it. It will not go automatically to the artist.
Yeah.
Okay. Yes, sir.
There are a number of people running around in this town that think if you have a contract with somebody, even a verbal contract, and say, here's $100, write me some code, they think that constitutes a work for hire. So, for 12 years I was an intellectual property consultant in town, and I am not an attorney, but deal with a lot of these practical issues, so I just wanted to underscore the point you were making.
Yeah, it's the thing is that a contract made on a handshake is not a good idea. You want something written down. I mean, for those who got to see Steve Roberts speak about speak at the beginning at 11 o'clock earlier, you got to consider the fact that the people you're in business with may not be your friends once money is involved.
Yeah.
Quite frankly, your own family will not be friends once money is involved. I had one recently. This was involved meeting with a client, and they were in this particular instance, a business was being set up, and the business had information, and the business was going to have intellectual property as part of its assets, and they had already decided how the business was going to be apportioned. The thing is, the business didn't actually own the IP. The IP was actually in the inventor. It hadn't been transferred yet, and so I had to explain. Well, you know, if something happens to you, Mr. Inventor, it isn't in your company, and it isn't going to any of those people. It's in you, which means it's in your estate, which means if you have a will, it's going to whoever you put down in your will, and if you don't have a will, it's going to whoever what Texas laws say for intestate, for a person who dies intestate. Now you can imagine how this will go over in a family business. Person is going to setting up a business with his friend and his soon-to-be and a family member, and they decide they're going to do this, and he dies, and his soon-to-be ex or her soon-to-be ex-spouse, but not divorced yet, inherits it all, and she hates those people. They will get nothing because there's nothing in the company. So that kind of reviews the 4 types, and we go through as to why you have it. At this point, I'm going to open up to questions.
Let me know if you just want me to keep my mouth shut.
Go ahead.
I have a little anecdote to go on with
Okay.
what you just talked about. Particularly since you're from Houston, there are 2 software development firms that have as a stepful property, and do not ever sign that agreement, because just that conditional claim against your IP will cause every investor in this town to drop.
But you can also look from the perspective of the company. If you're in the business of producing software, you want that in your agreement if you can get it in there, from the standpoint of, guess what? How many people have taken their IP and then, I just can't seem to find my checkbook today. They run up the big bill, and you're in the business. You're not in the business of taking IP. What are you going to do with it? You're not going to run their business. You want to get paid for the services you legitimately provided. You got no problem with the work for hire. You'd like the cash that you work for. So depending on which side of the table you are on, and that's something else to know about, right? And this is just general business contracts. Because I had someone, of course, we all know about the floods that occurred in Houston under Hurricane Harvey, and somebody came up to me and was asking about a consulting agreement. They were looking at a contingency agreement for a law firm that might be suing, and they asked me to take a look at that for them and explain if they thought it was a good deal. And I said, well, I mean, all the pieces of the contract are there, but as to whether or not it's a good deal, you got to decide whether you're comfortable with it or not. Because if you're not comfortable with it, just tell them change the contract. And if they push back, well, then you'll know the answer. There's nothing that requires you to sign the contract, and there's nothing that says you can't renegotiate it. And the fact that somebody comes and says, well, that's our standard contract, means nothing. That just means they don't want to take the time in order to negotiate with you. And if you've got somewhere else to go, either they're going to miss out, or they're going to have to make a deal with you. You had a question?
Yeah, so this is something we've been debating recently.
Mm-hmm.
We have an idea for an extension of our platform that we think is going to be very important, but we don't want to patent it because we don't want to take the right away from anyone else to recreate it, or even do something of a similar sort. So what was recommended to us is that we go ahead and write a white paper on the business aspect of it and what it does, impact-wise, but keep the intellectual property or the algorithms and how we're going to execute that a trade secret within ourselves. Because they said that the white paper will prevent people from patenting it for I don't know how long that is, but again,
infinite.
Okay.
So a white paper is a spoiler.
Okay.
A white paper is a spoiler. If you write out a public disclosure and you put it out there, it defeats the rights from the date that paper becomes public forever, from the purpose of patentability is concerned under the current law. So that means that that aspect of it that you have not protected as a trade secret is going to become public knowledge and can be used not only can people use it, copy that paper, and do what they want to, you will still have the copyright in your white paper.
Yeah.
But also that means that it can be used by the patent office to defeat patentability of any rival inventions that would be obviously derived from that white paper as well.
Okay.
And so there are certain groups, Electronic Frontier Foundation comes to mind, who they largely hate the idea of institutionalized IP. And because they believe it should be freedom, everything should be open source, it should be free. They love that kind of stuff. There are other groups that say, well, the problem is no one's ever going to invest in it unless they know that they can put metes and bounds on it. And I really did. There are certain industries that have no IP, practically no IP, in some areas. A good example of this is the fashion industry. Who copyrights a dress? Who patents a dress? And yet there's millions, billions of dollars in trademark rights in the fashion industry. Don't try to use that Louis Vuitton, or that Donna Karan logo inappropriately. But it's just so common in the industry not to have that flavor of IP that no one goes out and gets it.
So the business paper, if I were to draft that as white paper, the technical paper on how we are going to execute that idea, could that be patented?
The technical, it depends. Now,
so it's executed very differently. This is just the core idea.
The core idea, and it depends on how much the technical aspect is truly different. That is the technical application. Again, let's go back to the car with the rotary engine.
Yeah.
I've got this great idea. I've got the horseless carriage. Okay, I read a white paper on what life would be like if we didn't have horses. I wouldn't have to clean up all that manure. I would just have to, suck on these gases, which I'm sure will never cause harm down the road to the environment. Good idea. So, we do that. Now, I never tell you inside that I happen to have pistons and I happen to have valves and rings and cylinders. Now, I do tell you it takes something called gasoline. And so it's got an input and an output. But I didn't tell you how it's done. That I keep a trade secret. Okay? Or, because I have to sell it, I would get a patent on it. Because everyone's going to be able to look at it, take it apart now. So that can be done. So if your general concept, horseless transportation, you are able to do what you're suggesting.
Okay.
Yes?
How you doing? If you have, I wrote a book, so if somebody takes some quotes and put it on Instagram, Facebook, they can do that? Is that copyright infringement?
That depends, and this becomes the debate. There are exceptions to copyright law.
Okay.
For example, if someone is using something for educational purposes, that's considered to be a safe harbor item. If you say, hey, everyone can use this freely, people can do it then. If a person is taking quotes from your book for the purposes of performing a literary critique of it, they're writing a book review, then that's not copyright infringement. But if someone starts lifting a page out of your book and saying, okay, yeah, that's it, and by the way, this is important, copyright is not the same thing as plagiarism. They don't have to be claiming that they wrote it. They just have to be reproducing it to violate copyright. Some people think, well, you didn't give me credit. Giving credit does not inure them, does not insulate them from the fact that they've committed copyright infringement. Okay? You know, just because they quote, I'm giving you your attribution. But yes, if someone takes a substantial, and of course substantial can be a very small amount, of a work, it would be considered to be infringement. How many people have seen a James Bond movie? How many people know the James Bond theme? How many notes does it take for you to know that that's the James Bond theme? Like 4, 5, 6? So if you just stole those 4 or 5 notes from that set of sheet music, you've stolen the James Bond theme. Okay? It's kind of like if you were to, if it was a matter of copyright, and out of the entire I Have a Dream speech by Martin Luther King, you stole the line, I have a dream, that's kind of the central thought. That would be more likely to be found to be infringing than, say, something in the bottom of the second paragraph, only one sentence long, that uses a bunch of words that aren't really relevant to the message. So that's why I say it depends. It depends on the amount that's taken. It depends on what the central relevance is to the work. And that it's not in a safe harbor. It's not in an area that is protected by law to allow for the promotion of education and critique of works.
Can you talk a little bit more about education? Like what classifies it as being used for education?
It's used education, generally speaking, I mean, that comes down to specifics of a case, but education-wise, I mean, if a teacher is using a section of a book in the purpose of teaching students how to read, and it just happens to be, they all had to read a novel by James Thurber, then they would then they'd be using that material in class. That would be an educational purpose. That would not be violating the copyright for her to make a copy of a page to put up on the wall to say, now when you see this section of the text, this is how he's bringing forth this kind of a representation or this kind of motif in the language. This copy here would not be a violation of copyright. Also, of course, all the copies of the books in the student's hands would not, because once you've purchased something, that right collapses. That's where your first use right has occurred. Once you buy something, you can do whatever you want to it, but you can't copy it. So if I photocopy the book, create a new copy, I violate copyright law. But if I take my existing book, put lighter fluid on it, and burn it, that's fine. Because you purchased it. Once you buy it, you own it. It's a piece of property. This is where we run into, of course, the problem of I bought my, when they used to have DVDs, I bought my DVD, and then I uploaded it to, oh, wait a minute, now that's a copy. Because people, of course, would say, I have it, and now I'm going to just make lots of mixtapes and share it with my friends. Well, that's publishing. And that's publishing information, and that is making making a illegal copy, and that's where illegal downloading and other things come up, and cyber piracy, and issues like that. By the way, an important point about that is it is illegal to do those things, to upload that data, to make an illegal copy, but that doesn't necessarily make it illegal to actually view or listen to them, which creates the interesting conundrum. And that is that people are not allowed to upload from the source material or make a copy of the source material, but once they have done that, anybody who is actually streaming or watching it is not actually violating the law, at least the law as it's written today. Which is one of the reasons why the people who are, benefiting or harming through piracy, the other people, aren't terribly keen on necessarily helping rat out the people who are uploading. But of course, if you're in that business where you're going into it and you're going to make money being a musical artist or a video artist or something like that, you might be inclined to have people actually pay for your stuff. So, Yes.
Another quick question that I have, or like two of them, is one, you know, if we're like a content platform where people like submit content, right?
yep.
And if they record it on their own phone, and just if we include in the terms of service, that, you know, the ownership of this content is transferred over to us once you post on this platform, does that like waive us from most liability? If we do like
That's a complicated question.
Okay.
That takes a little bit more than that. I will tell you that I recently had an issue come up with someone was asking about the YouTube license. And the issue at hand was someone was taking snippets of a YouTube video and then they were rebroadcasting it somewhere else. And the issue was, is this a violation of my rights? And I said, well, you have to look at the YouTube terms of service. And YouTube's terms of service, at least the ones I read at the time, indicated that when you post on YouTube, you are granting YouTube and its family of users the rights to view and use. Part of being part of the YouTube community is if you put it out there, it's out there for other people to freely use. So you can't then come back and say, well, that person's just showing 30 seconds of my video, or and then they're taking it out of context, or they're showing the video and then they describe it the way I don't like it. You can't stop. Now, if someone alters the content, then they could be violating the terms of use of YouTube. And when they violate the terms of use of YouTube, then your copyright law, your rights come back. So you have a 6-minute video. I decide to cut it into 2 30-second segments and use that as a derivative work. That could be a violation of copyright because you gave them the right to watch your creative work in its entirety, not necessarily their right to take it and turn it into a bunch of sound bites and edits and something like that. That is now transforming it into something different.
So is that kind of like similar to defamation? Because that was my next question. Like if you're working with brands, right, or corporations who create like ads or campaigns on your platform, and it's like they do something wrong, but they push all the liability towards us. Like, what can we do in our contracts to ensure that we don't face like the bite back from them?
Well, you would
like transfer of ownership of the content that they create on the platform.
The thing is that you're giving when you grant, like for example, because one of the questions people asked about the YouTube was who owns it now? Does YouTube own my videos? And the answer is YouTube doesn't want to own your videos.
Yeah.
What YouTube wants to do is have a license for your videos. Because quite frankly, if you license away all the rights, then ownership doesn't mean much. Except for the fact of who gets the call when someone wants to file a lawsuit. I mean, let's think of it this way. You own a car. You're not allowed to drive it because you gave away the rights to drive the car to your child or to your spouse. It's sitting in your garage. You're maintaining it. You're paying for the gas. You're paying for the oil, but you're not allowed to drive it. You're essentially, that's a full license. That's like a 100% licensing arrangement, and that happens with intellectual property rights. Well, why do I even own it at all? Well, that's a good question. Now, most of the time, that doesn't happen because what happens is people license away a few of the rights. Or they license away all of the rights, but to different parties. They split it up. But usually they retain at least something. And when they retain something, then there's a point to that ownership. Because, of course, let's say, well, I own it. It's an asset. Yeah, but the rights you've given away are binding upon anybody who would buy that asset. So if an investment company comes along and says, I want to buy your patent, and you've already given an exclusive license to it away to somebody else, they're buying something they're going to quickly find out isn't worth anything. Because all the rights have been given away in exchange for something else. So, are there any other questions? Again, I'm happy to answer them. Some problems are more complicated than others, and with intellectual property, the most important thing to underscore is you need to get involved early. The minute you've got the idea is when you need to consider your strategy. You don't necessarily need to get a lawyer, but you need to consider your strategy. Consulting with a lawyer is good. Intellectual property is a complicated area to be in. Sometimes you're protected to a degree by your natural rights, i.e. copyright, and trademark. But when it comes to you have to do something, trade secret, you have to diligently protect, get an NDA or something like that, or a patent, you need to file an application, those require more upfront work. Okay, copyright and trademark, sometimes you can actually wait until you're ready to be in a situation where you need to sue somebody, but with patent and trade secret, you need to be diligent from the moment go. Yes?
Regarding the NDA, let's say you start doing business with this company, mid-level manager, you sign an NDA with them, their relationship evolves, and now they're coming in as investors. And the process of due diligence, obviously we want to be as transparent as possible and open as possible because we're about to start this relationship. Does that NDA that you signed maybe a year, 2 years ago with that mid-level employee applies to all that process and all the IP and business secrets and methods that you're about to share as part of the due diligence process?
Depends on what the NDA says. Depends on what the NDA says. I mean, does it include just this person? Does it include this person and the affiliates? Does it bind the business itself? Quite frankly, an agreement with a person isn't worth all that much because you're not interested in the person as a person. You're interested in the person as the vice president of a business entity or something like that.
It's signed on that.
Yeah. And the question then becomes: Is that business been transformed into something else? Is the business still the entity that you signed the agreement with? And now, once you've signed an NDA related to, which also depends on what it describes as being what the secrets are.
It was pretty open about all the information
Yeah.
that we're about to share, data, business methods, tech,
Right.
whatever.
So,
That being said, how would you? Obviously, your recommendation would be to sign a new NDA during the process, but sometimes that has a counter effect in the negotiation process.
yes.
Just because of the trust aspect. How would you recommend us to address that?
Well, the thing is that if you have an NDA, you have to weigh these things. If a second NDA to shore up any potential problems that you identify might create a damper on the business relationship, imagine how much worse it would be to go out there and not have protection. I mean, it's the football player going out to play the game, and they realize that this helmet I'm wearing might be cracked, and they're like, but I really don't want to make a stink about it to the coach. Well, it's your head. You impose and say, look, I think I need a new helmet, or do you let it go and take the risk that you're going to get that a bad hit's going to split that helmet in your skull in the process? There is a thing of business. The Japanese had a saying, "Business is war." The truth is that in business you sometimes need to be less agreeable, because when it comes right down to it, if they believe that they have the right that they own something that they shouldn't own, eventually, and it has value, eventually somebody will be suing you trying to take it away, or they'll try to outright steal it. The fact is that most intellectual property in the world has very little value, but you don't know that. Most patents don't have a whole lot of value until they do. And that's the thing. In the early stages, when you're busy preparing, you don't know if you're going to be the next Facebook or the next, name the company you don't know its name because they failed after day 3. You don't know. We all know that the successful company, the successful IP, is going to be from a very small percentage. But we just don't know which ones that is. So we have to a degree, protect it all. And once it starts to show proof that it has value, you start shoring up that protection. But unfortunately, the upfront stuff has to be done upfront on faith. Which is the reason why some companies are going to fail, and some are going to succeed. If you're going to succeed, my role as an IP lawyer is to help make sure that when you start seeing that indication of success, that you don't suddenly find out that the soil you were planted in was bad. And unfortunately, that is, where it comes down to businesses getting started and actually having, the one time you need legal protection the most is when you can't afford it. Because once you can afford it, well, one, everybody wants to give it to you. And two, it may be too late. And that's particularly a problem on the intellectual property side. Because there are certain rights that just don't come back into existence. This is where we're going to talk about, I'll mention, in the patent area, it's called the on-sale bar. The on-sale bar means that if you commercialize an invention and receive benefit from it, a clock starts in the United States. And that clock is for 1 year. If you don't file a patent application within 1 year in the United States, you can never get a patent on it ever. The idea is you can't be commercially benefiting and then come to the government for a monopoly. Now, while that may seem harsh, the United States is the easiest country about patent law in the world. In Europe, it's a principle called absolute novelty. The minute you make your first sale or even an offer for sale, your patent rights end. So it is very possible, and we have this happen. I've been selling this thing for 3 months. It looks good. I didn't file a patent application. Okay, we'll file a patent application in the United States. What am I going to do about Europe? You're not going to do anything about Europe. Because you should have done that 3 months before. And, typically, well, I never really sold it. I just had negotiations with these people. And did you quote a price? Yeah. No. Can't offer for sale either. The United States gives you the benefit of a 1 year clock. Some other jurisdictions give you a benefit of a 1 year clock. But there are still jurisdictions out there that give you 0. The minute you contemplated going into business, they'll let you do research and development. Everyone will let you do research and development. Everyone will let you do testing. But once you actually start saying, I'm going to put that product out into the marketplace, that's when either a clock starts or the rights end, depending on what jurisdiction you're in. And so that's very important. Because again, the story I started out with at the very beginning, you've got a brand new horse, you bring it out on the track and you shoot in the head. No one wants to do that. We'd say that's stupid and inhumane, cruelty to animals. Don't do it to your own company. Sir, you had another question?
Yeah, the question I was going to ask, is it more attractive, attractive to investors if you have an IP, or?
It is probably always attractive. Thank you very much. I think my time is up. My time is up right on time, 2 o'clock. If anyone wants to talk offline, I'll be here for a few minutes. I have brought with me some business cards in case we have an Austin office here, even though I'm out of Houston. And also, this is a general services placemat we use in order to explain to people the